Why did the barking come before the wind changed, before anyone realized they were already in trouble? The storm had been quiet at first, too quiet. Snow fell straight down, thick and soundless, swallowing the mountains of Eastern Europe like a held breath. Navy SEAL Team 7 moved in a staggered line, boots crunching softly, breath fogging behind balaclavas. Christmas Eve, the kind of night that reminded you of home when you least wanted to think about it. Lieutenant Commander Ross stopped again. His glove hovered over the GPS, then fell, dead. He didn't say it out loud at first. He didn't need to, everyone could feel it. The cold was no longer just uncomfortable. It was invasive. Fingers numb, thoughts slowing. 3 hours of walking in circles, the terrain mocking them, the white erasing every landmark they thought they knew. They weren't under fire. That was the cruel part. No enemy to fight, just weather, just time. "Sir," Chief Ramirez said, trying to keep his voice steady. His lips were already blue. "We need shelter." Ross looked at his men, elite, trained, unstoppable under normal conditions, and felt something close to helplessness settle in his chest. 15 miles from extraction. Comms frozen. Batteries dead. 30 minutes more like this and hypothermia would start making decisions for them. And then through the wind came a sound that didn't belong. A bark. Not frantic, not scared, clear, confident. Head snapped up, shapes blurred in the snow. 4 legs, fur crusted with ice. Bright, focused eyes cutting through the white like it knew exactly where it was going. A German shepherd emerged from the storm, wearing a tactical vest. Behind the dog came a woman, moving with controlled urgency, her posture calm despite the chaos. Petty Officer Sarah Chen. The same Sarah Chen they'd laughed at months ago. The same woman who had shown up to SEAL selection, with a dog on a leash. "Chief," she said, voice steady, almost gentle against the wind. "Atlas found shelter, cave system, 200 meters northeast, thermally shielded." Ross stared at her, at the dog, at the team shivering behind him. 6 months ago he would have dismissed her. Tonight he nodded. "Lead us." Atlas turned without hesitation, cutting a path through the storm like it could see what humans couldn't. And the men who once mocked her followed, step by freezing step, behind the dog that was about to save their lives. New text document. 6 months earlier, the sun over Coronado Naval Base had been merciless. 230 candidates stood in formation, sweat running down their backs, eyes forward, hearts pounding with the knowledge that most of them wouldn't make it through what lay ahead. SEAL selection didn't care who you were. It stripped you down to what you could endure. Then Sarah arrived. She walked through the gate carrying her duffel in one hand, in the other a leash. The whispers came first, then the laughter. A German shepherd trotted calmly beside her, ears forward, alert but composed. "Atlas." Someone snorted. Someone else shook their head. A few didn't even bother hiding their amusement. "Hey," a voice muttered, "this isn't a pet show." Sarah kept walking. Her face burned, but her spine stayed straight. Atlas matched her pace, every step deliberate. Master Chief Donnelly's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Candidate Chen." The laughter died instantly. Donnelly had built and broken careers for nearly 3 decades. He stopped in front of her, eyes hard, presence overwhelming. "This is SEAL selection," he said. "We don't do therapy dogs, we don't do distractions." Sarah swallowed. Her hands trembled just enough that she noticed. "With respect, Master Chief," she said quietly, "Atlas is a certified military working dog, search and rescue, detection, tactical support." The audacity of it hung in the air. "Get rid of the dog," Donnelly said, voice dropping, "or get off my base." Everyone watched, waiting for her to fold. Sarah looked down at Atlas. He sat calmly, eyes on her, trusting. The weight of every doubt pressed against her chest, every voice that had told her she didn't belong, every fear that she was asking too much of a world that didn't want to change. Atlas stays, she said. The consequences came swiftly. Her pack was heavier, her runs longer, her rest shorter. Atlas was sidelined, forbidden to assist. The candidates made sure she felt alone, tripping her, mocking her, barking at the dog when instructors weren't looking. At night, she cried quietly into Atlas's fur, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. But she didn't quit. Week by week, bodies dropped out, minds broke, numbers shrank. Sarah endured. She wasn't the loudest, she wasn't the strongest, but her navigation was flawless, her shooting precise, her mind calm under pressure. And when she was finally allowed to work with Atlas, they moved like something practiced and rare, two beings communicating without noise, without ego. People stopped laughing. They started watching. During the final evaluation, when equipment failed and egos flared, it was Atlas who found the explosives, Atlas who found the hostage, Atlas who proved without ceremony that partnership could be power. By graduation, Sarah and Atlas stood together, both exhausted, both unbroken. They deployed months later, cold terrain, high stakes, quiet missions. Acceptance came slowly, respect even slower. Then came Christmas Eve. The cave Atlas found wasn't miraculous, it was practical. Dry stone, shielded from wind, enough space to keep 7 lives from freezing. Inside, as heat packs activated and fingers regained feeling, no one spoke for a long moment. Pride had nearly killed them. Trust had saved them. Hours later, the storm passed. Back at base, Ross stood in front of the team, his voice thick. "I was wrong," he said, "about her, about the dog." One by one, they shook Sarah's hand. One by one, they knelt to thank Atlas. When Master Chief Donnelly arrived for the debrief, he said little. He knelt, scratched Atlas behind the ears, looked up at Sarah. "I was wrong," he said. That night, Sarah sat alone with Atlas curled beside her, phone pressed to her ear, snow falling softly outside. She felt tired, proud, quietly whole. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did she feel more afraid standing still than she ever did while running? The night after that first brutal day at selection, Sarah lay on her bunk staring at the ceiling, muscles twitching, skin raw with salt and sunburn. Around her, men slept in broken heaps, some already whispering about quitting, others snoring through pain they hadn't processed yet. The barracks smelled like sweat, antiseptic, and doubt. Atlas wasn't allowed inside. That rule cut deeper than any insult. She could still feel the leash missing from her hand, like phantom weight. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone. Not because she didn't belong, she'd known that feeling her whole life, but because the one constant that had steadied her through chaos wasn't there. She rolled onto her side, jaw clenched. Don't give them the satisfaction. By dawn, her body screamed before her mind was even awake. Cold ocean water swallowed her whole during surf torture, waves smashing her face into sand as instructors paced overhead, counting seconds like they were minutes. She tasted blood, then salt, then nothing at all. Her vision blurred. Someone next to her rang the bell. Then another. Sarah didn't move. She focused on one thing, breathing, in, out, counted like she used to count Atlas's steps during training drills, steady, measured, controlled. When they finally dragged themselves out of the water, Master Chief Donnelly walked the line slowly, eyes scanning for weakness. He stopped in front of her. "You look comfortable, Chen," he said. "Let's fix that." Her ruck that day was heavier. She knew it the second she lifted it. 10 extra pounds, maybe more. The straps bit into her shoulders as they started the march, boots pounding asphalt under the rising heat. Someone behind her muttered, "Guess the dog, not carrying it for you." Laughter followed. Sarah kept her eyes forward. Every step was a negotiation between pain and pride. Her legs trembled, her lungs burned. The urge to stop whispered constantly, seductive and reasonable. She ignored it. She always had. By the third week, exhaustion had settled into her bones like a permanent resident. She learned the language of pain, the difference between injury and discomfort, between danger and fear. Fear, she discovered, was loud but temporary. Pain was honest. It told you what was real. The others noticed she never complained. They also noticed she never bragged. That made her an easy target. During meals, sand found its way into her food. During drills, shoulders accidentally collided with hers, sending her sprawling. Once, during a night evolution, someone loosened her pack strap. It snapped mid-run, sending her crashing face first into the dirt. She lay there for half a second, stars bursting behind her eyes. Then she stood up and finished the run. That night, she finally got to see Atlas. He waited outside the barracks fence, sitting perfectly still, ears alert, eyes tracking her the moment she stepped into view. The sight of him almost undid her. She knelt, fingers threading into his fur, forehead pressed against his neck. "I'm still here," she whispered, voice breaking despite herself. "I didn't quit." Atlas licked her cheek once, tail thumping softly. No judgment, no doubt, just trust. That was the hardest part of all. Weeks blurred together, cold mornings, hot afternoons, endless repetition designed to strip away anything fragile. Candidates dropped like leaves, some left angry, some left silent, a few left carried. Sarah stayed. Her internal conflict never vanished. Some nights, she wondered if Donnelly was right, if she was forcing something that didn't belong, if tradition mattered more than innovation, if proving a point was worth the cost. But every time she pictured quitting, she saw Atlas sitting calmly at her side, waiting, and she couldn't reconcile that image with walking away. Navigation week came next. It was supposed to break people quietly. Alone in the dark, carrying a map and compass through unforgiving terrain, candidates were expected to find checkpoints without guidance, without help, without error. Mistakes compounded quickly. Confidence evaporated. Sarah thrived. Not because it was easy, but because it was familiar. She moved through the landscape like she was reading a living thing. Terrain spoke to her, slopes, drainage, wind, subtle markers others ignored. She finished each route efficiently, consistently ahead of time. Whispers followed her back to base. "She's solid. She doesn't crack. She's different." During a rare integration drill, instructors allowed Atlas to work under strict supervision. The mood shifted immediately. Jokes stopped. Eyes sharpened. Sarah didn't smile. She gave Atlas a simple hand signal. He moved forward, nose low, body language changing subtly as he worked. She watched him the way a musician watches their instrument, not controlling but listening. When Atlas stopped, sat, and held, she didn't raise her voice. "Device," she said calmly. The instructors checked. She was right. Again and again. By the end of the drill, silence had replaced skepticism. Master Chief Donnelly watched from a distance, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't comment, but he didn't interfere either. That scared her more than his anger ever had. The final evaluation loomed like a storm on the horizon, a simulated hostage rescue in an abandoned industrial complex. Tight corridors, poor lighting, hidden threats, designed to expose ego and punish complacency. Sarah was placed with 3 men who had never hidden their disdain for her. "Just don't slow us down," their leader said. She nodded, said nothing. Inside the complex, confidence turned to chaos quickly. Electronic detection failed, communications glitched, the plan unraveled. "We're blind," someone hissed. Sarah felt the moment stretch, the fragile space where decisions mattered. She could push. She could stay silent. She could let them fail. Her chest tightened. "Atlas can clear it," she said. They hesitated, pride warred with fear. Fear won. Atlas moved like he belonged there, found what machines missed, led them to the hostage they'd walked past twice. Every alert was precise, every movement purposeful. When it was over, the instructors didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The scores spoke. So did the looks. Graduation came quietly. No speeches about change, no grand declarations, just names called, tridents earned. When Sarah's name was announced, she felt something unexpected, relief more than triumph. Atlas sat beside her, calm as ever. They had survived something together. Not by being loud, but by refusing to disappear. And deep down, Sarah knew this was only the beginning. Why did the silence after graduation feel heavier than any of the shouting that came before? The morning after they earned their tridents, the base felt unfamiliar, too calm, too ordinary. The relentless pressure that had defined every hour for months was suddenly gone, leaving behind a hollow space Sarah didn't know how to fill. Men laughed more easily now, shoulders loosened, futures were being imagined again. Sarah sat on the edge of her bunk, running a cloth over Atlas's gear with slow, deliberate care. Graduation hadn't erased the past. It hadn't erased the looks or the quiet recalculations people still made when they thought she wasn't watching. Respect had been earned, but trust was a slower currency. Atlas sensed the shift. He stayed close, body relaxed but attentive, like he understood that peace was temporary. Their orders came 2 weeks later. Eastern Europe, mountainous terrain, cold weather operations, intelligence retrieval and route interdiction, real missions now, no instructors, no reset button. The flight over was silent, red lights, the hum of engines. Sarah stared at the floor, hands resting on Atlas's back. She felt the familiar pull of anxiety tighten in her chest, not fear of failure but fear of letting others down. The weight of responsibility was different now. Every decision would have consequences measured in lives. Ross briefed them on arrival. He was professional, neutral, fair. Still, she noticed how often his eyes flicked to Atlas. The first mission was routine on paper. Infiltrate, observe, extract, but nothing ever stayed routine. Snow fell lightly as they moved through the forest, each step measured. Sarah focused on her breathing, syncing unconsciously with Atlas's pace. The mountains loomed around them, ancient and indifferent. Halfway through the approach, Atlas stiffened. Sarah stopped instantly, raising a fist. The team froze. She crouched, watching Atlas's posture shift, ears forward, tail low, nose working the air. "What is it?" Ross whispered. "Something off," she murmured. "Not human, not fresh, but wrong." Ross hesitated, then nodded. A just route. They detoured minutes later around what turned out to be a concealed tripwire system buried under snow. If they'd continued, it would have been catastrophic. No one joked this time. Back at the temporary base, Ramirez approached her quietly. "Good catch," he said, "both of you." It wasn't loud praise. It didn't need to be. It settled in her chest like warmth. Over the next weeks, missions stacked up, night movements, long surveillance, extraction under pressure. Atlas proved himself again and again, not as a miracle but as a multiplier. He found paths. He sensed threats. He worked tirelessly, never asking why. Sarah learned the rhythms of the team, learned when to speak and when silence carried more weight. She learned that leadership didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it simply showed up early and stayed late. Still, doubt lingered. There were nights she lay awake listening to the wind claw at the walls, wondering if she was being tolerated rather than trusted, wondering if one mistake would undo everything she'd fought for. She never shared those thoughts. Instead, she trained harder, sharper, more precise. The mission that changed everything came without ceremony. A high-value intelligence package was being moved through the mountains. Extraction window narrow, weather unstable. "Get in, get out," Ross said. "No heroics." The climb was brutal, ice-coated rock. Wind cut through layers like they weren't there. Sarah's fingers ached despite heated gloves. Atlas moved ahead, steady and sure. They secured the target quickly, clean, efficient. Then the sky changed. Snow thickened, wind howled, visibility collapsed into white chaos. Comms failed first, then navigation. Ross tried to stay calm, but Sarah heard it in his voice, the edge, the creeping awareness that the mountain was no longer cooperating. They moved anyway, slowly, carefully. Minutes stretched, then hours. Cold seeped into joints, into thoughts. People stopped talking, conserving energy. That was when Sarah noticed the signs, the subtle ones. Ramirez's steps faltered. Another man's breathing turned shallow. Hands fumbled where they should have been automatic. Hypothermia doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers. Ross stopped. We need to reassess. Sarah looked at Atlas. Snow clung to his fur, but his eyes were sharp, focused. Her heart pounded. This was the moment. She could stay silent, let protocol dictate the end, or she could step forward again, knowing what it cost last time. Sir, she said quietly, let Atlas search for shelter. Ross looked at her, really looked, at her face tight with cold but steady, at the dog alert, ready. How confident are you? He asked. Sarah didn't hesitate, enough to bet my life on it. A pause, long, heavy. Do it. She knelt, gloved hands on Atlas's face, forehead touching his. Seek, she whispered. Atlas barked once and moved. They followed blindly at first, trusting movement more than sight. Sarah counted steps, breaths, heartbeats. Fear pressed in, not of death, but of being wrong. After what felt like forever, Atlas stopped, barked. Rock emerged from the white. Sarah brushed snow aside with numb hands. A dark opening. Shelter. Inside, they collapsed into motion. Heat packs, insulation, body checks. Fingers slowly regained feeling. Color returned to faces. No one spoke for several minutes. Then Ross exhaled shakily and laughed once, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. You saved us, he said. Sarah shook her head. He did. Later, after extraction, after debrief, Ross stood in front of the team. I owe you an apology, he said, voice thick. I doubted something I didn't understand. He turned to Sarah. That won't happen again. The words mattered more than the tone. That night, alone in her quarters, Sarah sat on the floor with Atlas curled against her side. Exhaustion finally broke through her defenses. Tears came quietly, unexpectedly. Not from pain. From release. She had carried doubt for so long she'd forgot what it felt like to set it down. Outside, snow fell softly. Somewhere, faint music drifted through the bass, someone humming a tune that sounded like home. Sarah rested her hand on Atlas's back and closed her eyes. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. She just needed to keep going. Why did survival feel heavier than fear once the adrenaline finally faded? The morning after extraction, Sarah woke before the alarm, heart racing as if she were still on the mountain. For a moment, she couldn't place where she was. Concrete walls, low ceiling, the steady, familiar weight pressed against her leg. Atlas. He lifted his head, ears flicking, eyes searching her face. She rested her palm on his neck and breathed until the room stopped spinning. Survival had a way of arriving late, of making itself known only when the danger had passed. Out there, everything had been simple. Step, breathe, trust. Now, with warmth and quiet, her body began to process what it had been holding back. At breakfast, the team was subdued. Coffee steamed in metal cups. Hands shook not from cold but from the aftershock of knowing how close they'd come. No one joked. No one needed to. Ross sat across from her, posture less rigid than usual. He looked tired, older. He met her eyes, nodded once, then looked away. It wasn't dismissal. It was acknowledgement. She felt it settle between them, something unspoken but solid. The debrief was clinical. Timelines, decisions. Lessons learned. Atlas's contribution noted without embellishment. No one argued it. When the room emptied, Donnelly remained at the back, arms folded, gaze distant. "Chen," he said finally. She turned, stood straight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You didn't do this to prove a point." "No, Master Chief." "You did it because it worked." "Yes, Master Chief." A pause. Good. That was all, but it stayed with her longer than praise ever had. They rotated missions, different valleys, different nights. Each operation carried its own quiet risk: ice that hid fractures, villages that slept too lightly, roads that remembered footprints. Sarah learned the weight of responsibility wasn't the decisions you made under pressure, it was the ones you lived with afterward. She learned how quickly confidence could become complacency if you let it. Atlas aged her sense of time. He noticed things she missed. He insisted on patience. When he hesitated, she listened. When he pressed forward, she followed. Together, they made fewer mistakes. Not none, fewer. On one mission, Atlas alerted late. A wire nicked a boot. No explosion, but the image replayed in Sarah's mind for days, the fraction of a second that could have ended someone's life. She sat awake that night, counting breaths, wondering if the mountain had given them mercy or a warning. She adjusted training, refined cues, changed how she read his posture. Growth came not from triumph but from correction. Winter deepened. Christmas passed quietly, a muted thing of messages home and stale cookies left in a common area. Someone played carols too softly to be annoying. Sarah wrote a short note to her mother and didn't mention the cave, the cold, the way her hands had stopped feeling like her own. She said she was fine, that Atlas was good, that she was where she belonged. The call came in January, not dramatic, just urgent. A small team had gone dark during a routine recon near a ridgeline known for old tunnel systems, smuggling routes from decades ago. Last ping placed them near a collapsed entrance, weather closing in. Search and recovery. They moved fast, faster than Sarah liked. Speed was sometimes a kindness, sometimes a risk. Atlas worked the slope methodically, nose tracing patterns no map could capture. He paused, circled, returned to a narrow depression masked by drifted snow. Sarah knelt, brushed it clear. Air flowed from below, faint, warm. Inside the tunnel, sound behaved strangely. Every footstep echoed twice. The smell was wrong, stale, metallic. Atlas's body language tightened. Not fear, focus. They found the team alive. Cold, injured, one with a broken leg. Relief came in waves that left Sarah lightheaded. As they extracted, she watched Atlas move back and forth, checking each person, refusing to relax until the last man was clear. On the way out, the tunnel shuddered. A soft collapse behind them, the mountain settling its debt. Back at base, one of the recovered men found her in the corridor. He didn't say thank you right away. He just stood there, hands in pockets, eyes wet. "I didn't think anyone would find us," he said. Sarah nodded. She knew that feeling, the moment when hope thinned to a thread. Atlas leaned into the man's knee, grounding, present. Weeks later, Sarah noticed a change in herself. She spoke more in briefings, not more loudly, more decisively. She trusted her read of situations. She trusted her team to carry weight with her. Trust, she learned, wasn't about being liked. It was about being reliable when it mattered. There were setbacks, a miscommunication that nearly compromised a route. A night when Atlas cut his paw on hidden ice and had to be carried for half a kilometer, Sarah's lungs burning as she refused to hand him off. Vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was reality. She sat with him that night, cleaning the wound, apologizing to a creature that didn't need the words. "I'll slow down," she promised. "I'll listen better." Atlas rested his head on her thigh and slept. The next operation came with a different tone. Intelligence suggested movement near a village that had learned to distrust uniforms. Sarah felt the moral weight settle in. Operations weren't puzzles, They were lives intersecting. Choices rippled outward. They moved carefully, avoided confrontation, let Atlas guide them around sleeping homes, around the places where fear lived. When they extracted, nothing exploded. No shots fired. Success measured in what didn't happen. Ross debriefed them afterward and said something that stuck. Restraint is also a skill. Sarah wrote it down. Spring hinted at itself in the way snow softened at the edges. The mountains breathed easier. So did she. One evening, after training, she found Donnelly watching Atlas work with a new handler candidate. The dog corrected the man gently, with patience Sarah recognized. "He teaches," Donnelly said, "not a question." "He does," Sarah replied. Donnelly nodded, "So do you." She didn't answer, she didn't need to. Later, alone, Sarah sat on the steps outside the barracks. The sky cleared enough to show stars, sharp and distant. Atlas lay at her feet, breathing slow. Survival had taught her this. Courage wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It showed up early, listened carefully, and stayed when leaving would have been easier. She scratched Atlas behind the ears and smiled into the cold. Some lessons don't come from victory. They come from choosing, again and again, not to look away. Why did the quiet before the briefing feel more dangerous than any gunfire she'd ever heard? The room was dim, lit by a single screen casting pale blue across tired faces. Coffee went untouched. No one joked. That was how Sarah knew this mission mattered. When experienced operators stopped filling silence, it meant they were measuring risk they couldn't yet name. Satellite imagery flickered. A valley, a cluster of abandoned structures, old infrastructure repurposed by people who understood terrain better than technology. Intelligence suggested movement patterns that didn't line up with anything clean or predictable. "Recon first," Ross said. "Minimal footprint, we don't spook anyone." Sarah nodded, eyes on the map, mind already building routes and contingencies. Atlas lay at her feet, still as stone. She felt his awareness like a second heartbeat. As they moved out under a moonless sky, the air carried a sharpness that made every sound feel amplified. Snow crunched too loudly. Breath felt visible even when it was. Sarah slowed the team more than usual, reading Atlas's posture, trusting the pauses. Halfway down the ridge, Atlas stopped. Not alert, not warning. Refusal. Sarah crouched, hand hovering inches from his harness. Her pulse quickened. Atlas never refused without reason. "Hold," she whispered. Ross halted the line. "What is it?" "Don't know yet," Sarah said, "but he won't move." They waited 30 seconds, a minute. Then Sarah heard it, a faint shift in the air, a sound too soft for most ears. Someone else moving, not close, but not far enough. They adjusted, slipped laterally, let the unknown pass without confrontation. Later, reviewing the drone footage, they'd see how close it had been. How a few steps more would have put them face to face with armed men who weren't expecting restraint. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. Atlas had saved them again, this time by stopping everything. Back at base, Sarah sat alone in the equipment room, hands resting on her knees. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a familiar tremor. Not fear, responsibility. Every success sharpened the edge. Expectations rose, margins shrank. She thought about the men who trusted her judgment now, about how easy it would be to fail them by assuming she always would be right. That night, sleep came late. When it did, it brought memories she didn't invite. The cave, the cold, the moment her fingers stopped feeling like fingers. She woke gasping, Atlas already on his feet, nose pressed to her chest, grounding her back into the room. "I'm here," she whispered, to him, to herself. The next weeks tested them differently. Long-range surveillance, days of stillness broken by moments of intensity. Sarah learned how patience could become its own form of exhaustion, how doubt crept in not during chaos but during waiting. On one operation, Atlas alerted repeatedly near a derelict structure. Each time the source turned out to be nothing actionable. Old scents, false positives. Sarah felt the team watching her more closely. She adjusted, changed approach angles, cross-checked indicators, but the pattern gnawed at her. That evening, Ross pulled her aside. "You good?" he asked. "Yes," she said automatically. He didn't push, just nodded, but the concern stayed with her. Later, alone, Sarah reviewed footage frame by frame. Atlas's alerts weren't wrong, they were early. Too early for human confirmation. She realized then that Atlas was reacting to shifts she didn't yet fully understand. Environmental changes, pressure, movement patterns not visible on screens. She recalibrated her trust, not downward but more precisely. The next mission proved it. An abandoned warehouse near a supply route. Atlas signaled discomfort, not alert, not refusal, unease. Sarah halted the team farther out than planned. They waited. Minutes later, a vehicle rolled through the site, armed, scouting. Had they moved in as scheduled, the encounter would have been unavoidable. Ross looked at her afterward. Good call. She exhaled slowly. Relief came not as triumph but as quiet confirmation. Still, the weight accumulated. One afternoon, Sarah found herself snapping during training. A short answer, a sharp tone, the room went still. She noticed Atlas's ears flatten slightly. Shame followed quickly. Afterward, she sat on the ground outside, helmet beside her, head in her hands. "I don't want to become that," she said softly. Atlas rested his chin on her knee. She remembered something her mother once told her after a long night studying. When you're tired, kindness feels expensive. That's when it matters most. Sarah made a point of slowing down again, of listening, of apologizing when she missed the mark. Leadership, she realized, wasn't about carrying everything alone. It was about knowing when to share the load. The call that nearly broke her came without warning. A handler team from another unit had lost their dog during an extraction. The animal had bolted under fire and disappeared into the tree line. Weather worsening, night falling. Search was optional, risk high. Sarah didn't hesitate. "We'll help." Ross studied her. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I am." They moved fast, Atlas pulling slightly ahead, reading the panic in the air like a language. Sarah followed him into terrain she would have avoided under any other circumstance. Steep, unforgiving. After nearly an hour, Atlas stopped, whined softly. They found the dog trapped in a ravine, injured but alive. The handler collapsed to his knees when he saw him, relief raw and unguarded. As they carried the injured dog out, Sarah felt something loosen inside her chest. Not pride, gratitude. Back at base, as medics worked, the handler approached her, eyes red. "Why'd you do it?" he asked. Sarah thought for a moment. "Because I know what it's like," she said, "to trust someone with your life." That night she sat with Atlas longer than usual, brushing his fur slowly, deliberately. She thought about all the moments that could have gone differently, all the ways quiet choices had changed outcomes. Not because of heroics, because of attention, because of care. The mountains didn't reward bravado, they rewarded respect. As winter began to loosen its grip, Sarah felt something unfamiliar take shape inside her. Not confidence, peace. She didn't need to prove the value of partnership anymore. She was living it. And whatever came next, whatever test waited beyond the next ridge, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wouldn't face it alone. Why did the final mission feel less like an ending and more like a quiet reckoning? The order came at dusk, the kind that didn't raise voices or rush steps. No urgency in tone, just wait. The kind you felt settle into your chest before your mind caught up. Limited window, high risk. One chance to retrieve confirmation on a network that had learned how to disappear. If they succeeded, months of uncertainty would finally close. If they failed, nothing would explode, but everything would remain unresolved. And sometimes that was worse. Sarah listened without interrupting, hands folded, Atlas at her side. She noticed how naturally the room angled toward her now when terrain or timing came up. No announcement had been made. No rank had changed, but something had shifted all the same. They moved out under a sky stripped bare of clouds, cold, clean, unforgiving. The mountains stood indifferent as they always had. Sarah felt calmer than she expected, not fearless, centered. This time doubt didn't shout, it whispered, and she answered it with preparation. The route was narrow, flanked by rock and shadow. Atlas worked steadily, neither rushed nor hesitant. Sarah trusted the rhythm they'd built together, the pauses, the slight turns, the moments when stillness mattered more than progress. Halfway through, Atlas slowed. Sarah stopped the team. The air felt different here. Thinner, charged, not danger exactly, anticipation. She crouched, studying the ground, the angles, the way sound carried. She realized then that she wasn't just reading Atlas anymore. She was reading herself, her instincts, sharpened not by ego but by experience. They advanced carefully. No confrontation, no dramatic exchange, just quiet confirmation of what intelligence had suggested. They had what they came for. Extraction was delayed by weather rolling in faster than predicted. Winds shifted. Visibility dropped. Not a blizzard, just enough to complicate. As they waited in a sheltered depression, Sarah felt the familiar pull of memory. Another storm. Another delay. Another moment where everything could narrow down to one decision. She watched Atlas scan the horizon, muscles relaxed but ready. No panic, no urgency. Just patience. Minutes stretched, then a signal cut through the static, extraction greenlit. They moved. When they finally lifted off, rotors biting into cold air, Sarah allowed herself one long breath. Not relief, completion. Back at base, the debrief was short, efficient, mission accomplished. But something lingered in the room after most had filed out. Ross stood by the table, hands resting on the edge. He looked at Sarah, not like a commander evaluating a subordinate, but like someone acknowledging a truth that no longer needed defending. "You changed how we operate," he said quietly. Sarah shook her head. "We adapted." He smiled faintly. "That's what I meant." Later that night she walked Atlas along the perimeter fence. Snow crunched underfoot, softer now, forgiving. The base was quiet. Lights dimmed. Somewhere, laughter drifted briefly, then faded. Sarah stopped and looked up at the sky, stars sharp against the dark. She thought about the girl she'd been when she first arrived. Hands shaking, face burning, refusing to let go of a leash because it represented something no one else could see yet. She thought about the cost, the nights alone, the weight of being watched, the constant need to be twice as precise, twice as prepared just to be considered equal. And she thought about what had carried her through. Not defiance, not pride, but care. Care for the work, for the people, for the quiet responsibility of choosing restraint over recognition. Atlas leaned into her leg. She knelt, resting her forehead against his. "We did okay," she whispered. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Weeks later, before redeployment rotations shifted, Master Chief Donnelly requested her presence. His office was sparse, utilitarian. No trophies, no speeches. He gestured for her to sit. "You know," he said, staring at a point on the wall, "I used to think leadership was about removing variables." Sarah listened. "Turns out," he continued, "it's about understanding them." He looked at Atlas, then back at her. "You didn't bring a liability, you brought clarity." Sarah absorbed the words without reacting. She learned that some validation arrived late and quietly for a reason. On her last night before leave, she sat alone in her quarters, duffel packed but untouched. Atlas slept nearby, paws twitching in dreams she'd never know. She called home. Her mother's voice filled the room, warm and familiar. They talked about small things, food, weather, neighbors. "Are you safe?" her mother asked softly. Sarah looked at Atlas, at the gear, at the quiet she'd earned. "Yes," she said, and meant it. After the call, she lay back on the floor, staring at the ceiling, letting stillness settle without guilt. She realized she wasn't waiting for the next test anymore. She was ready for it, but not defined by it. When morning came, snow fell gently, almost ceremonially. Sarah clipped Atlas's leash, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to feel its weight again. A reminder. They walked out together, unremarkable among the movement of a waking base. No applause, no spotlight. Just two figures moving forward, steady and sure. Sarah understood now what the mountains had taught her all along. Strength doesn't announce itself. Trust doesn't demand belief. And dignity doesn't argue its place. It shows up early, listens carefully, acts when it matters, and when the storm comes, it already knows the way out.